Good morning. So today we're going to be talking about hookah versus smoking and all the things that go along with it for our extra credit project for our pharmacology of cannabis, tobacco, and vaping. So to start off with the origin and background of hookah, I kind of based all of my slides similar to how we did it in class so I could reach all the points to cover everything. So hookah originated in India well over 400 years ago and has been the most common form of nicotine consumption until the 70s or 80s, and that's about when different forms of nicotine byproducts became available. Hookah had a large influence in the eastern continent thanks to the Mughals, the ruling empire over India at the time. The Mughals introduced this into the royal society first, and with their influence allowed it to become a common thing among other social classes, with both men and women using this. As the use of hookah heightened, so did the rituals and etiquette, leading to a hookah servant, known as a hookah birdar, who was in charge of the preparation and ceremony that occurred during hookah smoking. Come the 18th century and the British's housing of India, this allowed for the British East India Company to spread the use of hookah to their own country and others. Very similar to how in the US the Indians showed the colonizers how like their forms of nicotine and how they used it for medicinal purposes and rituals and everything else. So on the opposite side of this, or opposite side of the country, continents, you have in India doing a lot of the same thing. And then the British proceeded to take on this custom and follow in the footsteps of where it originated by incorporating the use of hookah in many social settings and employing a birdar to help facilitate this. While hookah was originally used just by like the native Indians, thanks to the Mughal Empire, they allowed for many of really all of society to take part in this as they modified the hookah instrument itself in order to make it readily available for just about any class of citizen. And it became very common practice to use hookah. To look at how hookah works, you have the mouthpiece, the bowl, the saucer, pipe, and then the water jar. I put the water jar twice because I didn't really know how to explain the number 5 and 6 mechanism. And then the mouthpiece again because it has two functions. So hookahs work as demonstrated in the figure listed to the side. The mouthpiece allows for the inhalation of smoke, which is the end product of the hookah, while also allowing for the cycle to begin and end. It contains a filter piece, which is very similar to a cigarette and how it is expected to help filter out the toxic chemicals and tar within the product being smoked. The bowl holds the tobacco around 10 to 20 grams that is being smoked, and the saucer is what holds the charcoal that burns the tobacco itself. The tobacco is covered by an aluminum foil and to help retain the smoke to send it through the pipe to pass through the water and then inhaled, which is why if you look at 5 and 6, like right here, you can see like the mouthpiece, you inhale in order to like get the coals to burn in order to release the nicotine from the tobacco, which then travels through this right here to then vaporize right here in this chamber above the water to then be reused through the mouthpiece to inhale the nicotine content itself. When looking at the basic chemistry of hookah, it is very similar to what was taught in our tobacco lectures, as hookah is primarily tobacco that is used in cigarettes and other like cigars and snuff and other tobacco byproducts. And so they both contain many of the same toxic chemicals such as carbon monoxide, aldehydes, PHAs or carcinogenic polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, aromatic amines, tar, ammonia, and heavy metals. The thing is, there is no quantification or enough relevant studies to show just how much nicotine or other toxic chemicals that are consumed, because there are so many different types of product that can be smoked, as well as the normal smoking sessions of hookah are between 60 to 90 minutes and are very much a social gathering style where everyone like kind of gathers around and shares the hookah and uses it kind of like to bond. And other, if you look at it from like the 18th century or the 17th century when it was introduced for medicinal purposes or social gatherings and things like that. It has also been shown that with hookah, the puffs are dependent on inhalation, the number of puffs, and depth of the puff, and more. It has also been shown that due to the humid nature of smoking hookah, it allows for deeper inhalation due to the less dry nature compared to smoking a cigarette. When smoking hookah, it has been found to have a higher plasma nicotine level, and this can be attributed to the length of a general smoking session in comparison to a cigarette, because of the fact that a cigarette generally takes between like 4 to 7 minutes to smoke, whereas a hookah session you're smoking for anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours. So you're constantly hitting the hookah over and over again, getting basically inhaling a lot of nicotine and other harmful chemicals. And then if you look at it as well, it's very similar to the vaping epidemic that's going on, because of the fact that there's so many different styles of hookah like available, or I wouldn't say style, I would say byproduct that can be smoked. So you have many different flavorings as listed below. You can see you have the Mausal, which is honeyed, which is 30% tobacco and 70% honey and sugarcane flavored with other flavors and contains glycerols. And then you have Malsa, I'm butchering these words, I'm sorry, which has about 3.4 milligrams per gram of nicotine content. And then you have Duroc, which contains tobacco, dried spices, sugarcane, and dried fruits. So very similar to vaping and other byproducts, or like smoking like THC pens and things like that. With hookah, there's so many different styles and products on the market that is available to be inhaled. Especially if you're looking at like going to a hookah bar, which is very common. I know in here, like in my area, we have quite a few hookah bars where people will go and they can book anywhere from an hour to a 2 hour long session and pick the flavors and styles and get like different ones. And then you're just sitting there inhaling these byproducts for that amount of time, which is a lot of nicotine. And then you can really compare that too with how e-cigarettes and like vaping and THC pens and all of that are so readily available due to the flavoring and the effects that it gives and how it's normalized in today's society. It's very, very similar to that. Hookah also is very similar to cigarettes in the fact that it contains almost 4,000 chemicals, and when it's burned, it contains almost 40 carcinogenic materials that you're now exposed to and you're putting within your lungs and your body and really affecting your overall health. And when it's done on like a regular basis, it causes a large amount of damage. Another thing to add is how smoking cigarettes and hookah are alike but different. While smoking hookah is another form of smoking cigarettes, as we learned in the course, there are many of the same consequences, including inhalation of large amounts of nicotine, carbon monoxide, tar, and other harmful chemicals, and then increases the risk of heart, lung, bladder, and oral cancers, because it's essentially the same thing, but a different way to consume the nicotine. However, there's different consequences of hookah because of the fact that you're sharing this instrument to inhale these properties. So you're now exposing yourself to not only the harmful chemicals that you're inhaling, but also the many different diseases and sicknesses that your friends may carry, like the flu and COVID and HIV or herpes or whatever. I know that's very drastic, but you're now exposing that because you're sharing mouth to mouth the same mouthpiece because it's not interchangeable as you're performing this act. Another consequence of this is that you can easily overdose on nicotine, and carbon monoxide poisoning increases in your risk because of the fact that you're sitting and smoking for such a long period of time. You're now able to inhale deeper. You have a larger amount available to you. You can, gosh, so many things. The depth of the puff, like all the things I listed a few slides ago, makes it that much more harmful because you're getting this large amount of nicotine at once, which can, as we learned, can cause very severe side effects like tachycardia and heart palpitations and so much more. And then attached, of course, I have my works cited on where I got all of my information from. I will say that this author above this one was probably my favorite read out of all of it when learning about it because it was explaining like the origin and how everything really came about. And so having that in-depth analysis, as I never really understood Hookah and how it really worked, I believe that that was very beneficial in reading. And then of course the other reads were also very beneficial because there's so much that is alike but different when it comes to smoking hookah compared to cigarettes and cigars and everything like that. Because while hookah was very common for a while and is now starting to make a comeback, it's not, it did get overtaken by the availability of cigarettes and e-vapes and everything else because they're so readily available. And following on the trend of e-vapes, there's now handheld smoking like hookah devices that you can bring with you all the time and that are like readily available without having to have like this entire like grand instrument that allows you to like complete this whole setup and everything else. And now it's just a little handheld device that you can have access to at any point in time. So thank you for listening.